real example. Okay, so then how about we got a lot of interest in the AI part also, and how do we see AI only as part of data collection, or maybe finding solutions, data analysis and finding solutions? So perhaps Leo, would you like to discuss how can we utilize AI in the future for measuring circularity, and is it only data collection or more data analysis specifically in the built environment industry?
Yeah,
what do you think?
I mean, absolutely. It's quite a large topic, so I'm gonna try to keep it short. And let's also kind of like focus it on kind of like the AI we have right now, not kind of like the things that we might be forecasting that might come to pass. You know, artificial general intelligence that might solve quite a lot of our problems and introduce a lot of new issues. But kind of like let's ignore that for now and just think of this kind of like specialized AI that does something very specific, like collecting data, or you might also call it data capture. So yeah, absolutely. That's one of the use cases for AI in circularity. A lot of the information and the materials, the data we have and the information we have is really messy. There isn't really structure that we can use right now, and AI can help us with that. So okay, let's have the AI organize the information into a format that we can use later in a more efficient manner. Because that's one use case, and that's obviously what our company is working with. But then there's yes, so optimization is one thing that you can use AI for. It's not always the best use case for it, but that's one of the use cases. And also then this design generation. So hey, once you have some structured data, you might have an AI solution suggest different options to you, and that might mean a number of things. It can be kind of like straight designs, it can be text, it can be visualizations of what an interior might look like if you actually used available circular materials. I think supply and demand matching would also be a really good one for circularity. And yeah, I'm gonna let the other people kind of like
I'd love to jump in and add something here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think on top of the predictive capacity, which I think is actually quite a cool use case, because you can use AI to kind of model or forecast future patterns in resource usage or in waste generation. And that allows you to kind of start thinking about how you can optimize based on that prediction. But I think there's also an aspect of generative design. The best creativity or the best innovations come from crossing over unrelated sectors or unrelated or seemingly unrelated expertise areas. If I am trying to design a train and I've used biomimicry, having a biologist background is going to be really useful for making a train that's really aerodynamic, but it's very hard for me to become an expert both in the engineering and biology. So to have those serendipitous crossovers between sectors happens quite randomly with people. If you have AI put into the mix, and AI can become an expert in any different area, and then mix and match different ideas from across different sectors or expertise areas to come up with completely new designs, and to come up with thousands or millions of them that we can then curate which ones work for us the best. So I think AI is going to completely swing the door open for the kinds of inputs that we have, and we won't have to spend so much time at the drawing board waiting for some kind of magic to happen, because we'll have an AI, or we'll have, even with the tools that we have out there now, we'll have AI that'll be able to provide tons of different starting points for us. So I think it's both the predictive piece, it's the data collection and filling in data gaps and cleaning, but it's also the generative design that I think is very exciting here.
That's actually a super good point, Omar, and kind of like what you can actually do after, and like, okay, you've collected the data, you've generated, say, 1,000 designs. You might also have an AI actually evaluate the designs after that. Just kind of like, let's pick out the best ones. And, you know, it might be aesthetics, it might be sustainability, but it might also be financial information. And I think that's something that really has to happen for circularity to really break. There needs to be clear financial incentives, not just kind of like, you know, a little bit of carrot as opposed to just a stick.
Yeah, I think the design piece also could be about innovation, but it could be about operations or logistics. So, for example, if I'm Nike and I'm trying to
it's breaking off.
It's breaking.
I can't hear you. Yeah. Do you mind kind of like repeating the last thing?
Is already a lot of lost time. if I have an AI system that's able to predict, okay, where is the demand going to be increased? How can I shorten the journey that this product is making to come all the way back to the warehouse? And instead, maybe if it's being bought in Japan and there's demand in Hong Kong, that we ship it a much shorter distance, because the AI is able to look at all these different trends to social media, look at market behaviors, look at the performance of stores, and to kind of come up with an estimation of where's the best place that I can send this product to make sure that it gets reused and doesn't go to landfill or incineration. So I think, yeah, it's about optimizing, but it's also about coming up with new pathways that are leveraging a ton of different data sets that it's very hard for a human to balance without an AI assistant.
Very good. Very good
If I
indeed.
may
Yeah,
add
please.
perhaps a perspective from even before getting into AI, which is very uncharted territory for me, but I realize the potential, is the transparency and comparability of that data points that we're all gathering. And something that we're working on, and we're certainly not the only ones, is building data exchange protocols that help companies exchange data and gather those data points in similar ways. A standardized way to share information about circularity, so that then it's much easier for AI to come up with results that companies can use that are comparable and based on as closely as possible the primary data that we need to make decisions that are useful for companies and have those benefits or trade-offs very clear as well. So this is also based on our work for PACT, the Partnership for Carbon Transparency. That has developed a protocol that companies can use to exchange data with suppliers. And with circularity, obviously, we need a two-way protocol with data that goes across the value chain in two directions. And I would see this as quite necessary to then allow the AI to turn the results that we want them to turn for everyone benefits.
Really
yeah,
good.
that's a super good point. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need to get kind of like comparable numbers that we can actually optimize over time to actually prove that we're making progress.
Maybe this touches a little bit. I take a few questions from the audience also. They're interested to hear more about supply and demand matching and how we can use that to reduce the raw material use. I don't know if somebody wants to answer more on that and how we can, yes, to advance this topic of the supply and demand matching, and maybe with help of AI. So elaborating more on that. I don't know if some of you want to take that question.
Yeah, I can talk about that, but I'm going to let some of the other ones maybe. It'd be great to hear something from Joni, for example, on the textile industry.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I have to pick up the Omar's example of this cross-pollination between biology and engineering, because SPINNOVA's background is actually with biomimicking, and it started with spider at a spider lecture, where they thought that is it possible to make a textile fiber by mimicking spider. We have been jokingly saying inside the company that we have 400 million years of fiber expertise, because apparently spiders have been at the planet about that time. So, but it actually sounds a good idea to really think how we can learn more from the nature, and in this case, with the help of artificial intelligence. In our case, it happened in a traditional way without help of new technology. But anyways, yeah, it's a good question about what we are seeing from our point of view is that the textile recycling is really on early stage. That's for sure. A lot of things happening, new capacity coming, new innovation also. But it's still, especially here in Europe where we are based, we are seeing legislation pushing towards that direction. But it's really catching up other material systems. What are recycled pretty well today. So yeah, for sure, they're probably, when we are talking about these massive volumes and very scattered streams of materials, it sounds like AI-powered tools could help there.
And Leo, did you have something you wanted to add to that? You mentioned you had
sure.
something.
Yeah, sure. Like this biomimicking sounds like super interesting. It'd be great to learn more about that. But on the kind of like the construction side, one of the big problems in circularity is that designers don't really know what materials are available because they are not interchangeable all the time. You have a lot of kind of like, you know, specific concrete elements, for example. How many do you have available? Are they actually something you can disassemble and take off? There's a lot of uncertainty around that, which ends up with companies not really making decisions to actually use circular materials necessarily. So just making that data available, and like on the supply side, what materials can you actually find, but then also kind of like creating this demand side that the designers or the manufacturers actually are looking at, you know, utilizing existing materials. Yeah, that's kind of like take from the construction industry maybe.
I also want to jump in and talk a little bit about this because I saw a question in the comments about the supply and demand matching. Do you know of any projects that advance this topic? We tried to start an AI project in Austria, but the problem here is that regulations to use waste are so strict that it's hard to implement the matchmaking. So we have a little bit of experience with this. Start small, start with a pilot project. Involve policymakers at the early stages, involve academia and NGOs. And as an example, we worked with an industrial park on industrial symbiosis. So mapping all of the material flows and the energy flows and figuring out where the waste hotspots were from just a handful of companies that all operated within the same area. And then trying to close the loop in every way that we could to see, are these loops closable? Are there valuable byproducts coming out of one factory that could be useful input into another one? And then once you have that operating on industrial park scale, that creates a lot of data and evidence that you can then take to the policymakers to start creating a shift in the tide. So I think that's one part of it. The other part is to look at what's available out there in terms of online digital marketplaces where people are starting to blog increasingly what excess materials they have, what waste they have. And you have a lot of these tools that are now starting to integrate Internet of Things and AI. And the thing I talked about or mentioned earlier with digital product passports is only going to increase that more and more across supply chains. So we're in the early days of this matchmaking. But I think if you are really struggling in your context, the best place to start is to start small and to build up from there.
Indeed, very good. Now we're talking about technology. How can AI help, and having really advanced thoughts about matching supply and demand and so. But then I go back to Joni talking about mimicking nature, and then there was a question from Soma in the chat that there are indigenous communities in the world that have circular practices by default. And are we aware of any efforts to learn from them or reward them in addition to moving forward with new initiatives, right? We're always looking forward to new initiatives. How can we improve? How can technology help us? But what about we already have some solutions since centuries, and we are looking to new ways of learning those again. So does somebody have something to add to this great question? Maybe anybody from the panel wants to take it?
Yeah, it's a quite philosophical, but of course we are learning from different cultures, and for sure I think many of us, with all these planetary boundary discussions and others, like Omar also showed, I think we are humble enough also to learn from very traditional culture about things. And one thing is, of course, that I think is very much aligned with the circular economy concept is use of renewable materials, and I think we should, as businesses and business systems, to try to find more and more ways to balance the use between synthetic and renewable raw materials. We are of course representing the renewable raw material side. We of course will need both, but it's still the synthetic is based on finite material cycles. So that's maybe one connection point there.
I also can jump in again, although I don't really keep jumping in. I originally come from Egypt, and the circular economy topic is just how people do economics in Egypt. They've been doing it for decades. When something rips, you fix it. When your technology breaks, you fix it. So every time I go visit my family, I'm bringing a suitcase back of all the stuff that's really expensive to fix here or impossible to fix here in Amsterdam, but that I can fix for pennies on the dollar in Egypt. So yeah, of course, there's a lot of places around the world where it's just the norm to think in a circular way. But those places are not the ones that have the most significant impacts on the planet. It's where we are now in the West that definitely is the culprit here. So if we end up with a totally different name for something that's been done for a long time, but it's starting to address some of these major issues that the West is putting out into the world, I don't really have an issue with that. If they're taking credit from indigenous people, as long as people from Egypt and from other countries are continuing to live sustainably and to have circular thinking, I'm happy to have that spread in other places, even if they're not spending the credit where credit is due. As long as their impacts are coming down, I think we're in the right place.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, excellent answers from the panel. And thank you, Omar, and thank you, Joni, for those comments. I would like to ask in the audience, we have some questions here, but if in the audience you'd like to raise your hand if you have some specific question you'd like to interact with the panel, please, now's a good time. You can raise your hand and I can give the mic to you or just chat into the box. Okay, so we have here, would it be possible to use generative AI to develop specific CE principles for SMEs to effectively adopt circularity within their business? What would be the best way to introduce this change to management so that they want to implement such practices? So in general about how to, it was one of our questions also here for the panel, how to really get these CE principles into the company, and then again, how can generative AI develop these specific principles? So would you like to, somebody, it's in the chat, this question.
Yeah, I think there was a great point by Omar before that generative AI. So let's say something like ChatGPT or Google Gemini, you can use that to actually kind of like upskill yourself. You can ask kind of like expert questions from it, and that might help you convince some manager, some company. You know, the manager might also ask this kind of question from an AI.
Yeah, that's very good. Everybody can participate. There's a very democratic AI. Everybody can participate in this, in the circularity. And then we have a question. Kerry has raised the hand in the audience. Would you like to? You have a question.
Hi, yes, I'm Kerry Dinsmore. I work for the Scottish Government as a science advisor. I think it's really interesting, the discussion on the supply and demand matching. So I guess I have a question on scale. I mean, on one sense, you've already mentioned something like an industrial park where you start at a small scale. But I'm kind of wondering, if you go to a larger scale, does that give you more options? So for example, countrywide, is that easier because there's more places it could be sent to? Or equally, do you keep it within a sector, or do you look multi-sector? And then I guess the next follow on to that is, you know, what are the main barriers at the minute to actually applying this? Is it just data, or is it technological still?
Yeah, data hygiene is really the name of the game here. And that's why it works well on an industrial park scale. And sometimes it's a little bit more difficult when you scale it up. I'm going to share the link to this project that we did with the WBCSD in the chat, because I think it's really useful to understand how this can be scaled up if you start collecting the right data and sharing it with the right stakeholders. It can be international, could be national, could be sectoral, as long as the data is intercommunicable. That's the main challenge here. But I'll share that link, and I think you can start to see in a really tangible way how data sharing will be the main accelerant for driving the CE transition.
Yeah, another way to think of it, of course, and this might be a little bit obvious, but you might also just kind of like focus on a thing, kind of like, instead of thinking kind of about scale initially, you might just think of let's focus on a specific material, or maybe, you know, let's say bricks from existing buildings might be more valuable than new bricks. So a company might just focus on collecting bricks from demolition sites, kind of like preparing them and then selling them. And there's kind of like a small value chain already in, because you might have contacts that need to buy these bricks, right? So it makes it simpler. You don't have as many wheels turning on, so it's easier to get started. And kind of like you ask about the kind of like geographics for that, or so for example with construction materials, they are typically very heavy, so you don't really want to transport them for really long distances. So what usually happens then is that they're produced within a few hundred kilometers from where they're used.
Indeed. Anybody else would like to add to this topic?
Maybe from the textile industry point of view, the barrier side, of course, the traditional challenge of current recycling technologies. Our company is not doing the recycling. We are providing the clean manufacturing technology then based on the recycled raw material. But the challenge what we have learned is, of course, that the mechanical recycling technologies, they of course weaken the quality of recycled material. That's one challenge. And then of course all the chemicals, contamination or chemicals included in the fibers, then if it's mechanically recycled, they all remain there. And then answer to that is then chemical recycling and to scale that up. But it's still a bit of early days. So even if the matchmaking works, then you also need proven technologies to process those matched materials with the lowest impact possible.
I think across industries, there's always the challenge is that the recycled material, reusable material is the cost of it would be more or less equivalent to the new raw material. So that's always the challenge that I hear in the built environment industry with the buildings, with the bricks. They're very expensive, the recycled bricks, or keeping it in the whole process of verifying it and then storing it for the new building, right? So there's like questions and a lot of work to go ahead and. But yeah, it's really interesting to have these pilot cases where they are used, and there's a lot of opportunities in the future. But I think I hear in the textile or in the built environment is that there's the cost of that material, and the process of making it and recycling it is still work in progress. But if somebody wants to add to this still something, and then we might have to take the very last question as the time is running out. Even we are having such an interesting discussion, might need part 2. But go ahead if you had something to add to this, and then we take the very last question, and then we close the session. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I could just point out that touching on what was just said by Joni, I think robotics is an area that is advancing really fast because of these new advances in AI, and I think that's a really interesting case especially for the construction industry, because a lot of the costs come from labor, well, materials of course, but the labor costs are high, and robotics is something that can help us actually do that more efficiently and at a lower cost over time. So you might look at something like Z Robotics or RT2 by Google.
Indeed. And often many pilot projects, many things are done manually. When it's scaled, it's of course like there will be robotics assistance. And okay, so maybe we'll look into the policy making. Perhaps that's the last question. We have a lot of questions in the chat. We'll try to answer them afterwards. We can share answers with you afterwards to these. Maybe we have the policymaker, regulator. How could they support the circular economy principles and the AI inclusion and circularity for businesses and industries? Maybe Irene, would you like to add something to that point about how policymakers and regulators could support more this transition, or anybody? The whole panel is open for answering.
Well, in terms of data, obviously the digital product passport is creating quite some waves, and we see at least the companies we're working with were really stepping up their efforts, and that's also why we did that work with Metabolic to identify some of the data points for some of the sectors that are concerned by the digital product passports, so the companies can start building the capacity to even identify where they can find the data. So that's a huge driver. And overall, we see that there are a number of barriers to circularity that will benefit from policy interventions, not necessarily linked to AI that I may comment on, but there's what Omar was talking about in terms of reparability, for example. It has become very expensive in certain contexts, and therefore we do need policy interventions that perhaps help reduce those costs and make reparability more attractive to consumers from a financial perspective. So a number of interventions that we're also working with partners in an initiative that we call the Global Circularity Protocol. That includes policy, but also that circularity data exchange protocol that we need to develop so that AI results are based on a standardized understanding of how you gather data and what kind of data needs to be gathered. So there's really, the sky is the limit at this point, and perhaps colleagues can comment on more the AI specific aspect.
Maybe, yes, is there Leo or Omar or Joni on the AI specific aspect? Thank you so much, Irene. That was a really good summary of what is required and what is available.
Well, I think that the supportive infrastructure is just as important as the policy and data piece that the policymakers can step in and support. And that's also an area that AI can be really helpful in. Trying to figure out in a kind of matchmaking sense what the best public-private partnerships are, where to focus research and development efforts, and where to combine best practices. I think these are all areas that policymakers can step in and accelerate, cross-pollinate across regions or across sectors, in addition to aligning their policies, because we have all these different frameworks that are emerging around the world for reporting. We need to start seeing a coalescing of these different methodologies in the future so that companies aren't being pulled in so many different directions as they report in one context or another.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that the policymakers are conscious of the fact that these businesses that come up around, like sprout up around, is need to be profitable, and that they consider that, because otherwise there's not going to be anything, and the Americans and the Chinese are just going to run past. For example, different restrictions around data is something that will lead to data siloing, because people are afraid of not breaking the rules. So that and the cost of having less restrictions is something that's actually very hard to see. So I hope that this is something that will be kept in mind.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so it's 1 minute to 12 in Finland, 1 minute to 11 CET, Central European Time. So I want to thank you so much for joining. It has been a really interesting session. Thank you for the speakers from around Europe and the international attendees from around the world. Again, we will be sharing the slides and the recording, and then please contact us speakers, myself, we are collaborating also together. So please contact for any of these topics, and we'll be happy to help you forward with measuring, with reporting, with changing, systematic change, with all these different topics, indicators, and so AI enabling also the change. So thank you so much. Wishing everybody a great day, and hope you enjoyed it. We see a lot of thank yous in the chat, so thank you to speakers. Okay, keep in touch.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
Omar.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you,
everyone.
Irene, Leo,
Thank
Joni.
you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.